I stood there in the scorching sun, staring at my bone-dry irrigation ditch, my heart pounding harder than a jackhammer on pavement. My well had never run dry before, not even in the worst droughts, but now, with my crops on the brink of death and my livestock thirstier than a dog in a desert, my water was vanishing like a ghost in the night. I rubbed my temples, feeling the sweat trickle down my face. Something wasn't right. Someone was stealing my water. And when I found out who, they were going to pay, literally. It all started a few weeks ago when I noticed my well's water pressure dropping. At first, I thought it was just the summer heat taking its toll, but then it got worse. My irrigation system barely trickled out water, my cattle stood around their troughs in confusion, and my crops looked like they'd given up on life. I called a plumber, a grumpy old man named Earl, who stomped around my property, mumbling to himself while I followed him like a lost puppy. After an hour of inspecting pipes, he scratched his head and said, "Ain't no leak, Jake. You got yourself a thief." I laughed. A thief? Who in their right mind would steal water from a farm? Then, I stopped laughing because I knew exactly who. Karen Whitman, my delightful neighbor. A woman who had been a thorn in my side since the day she moved in. She complained about the smell of my farm, the unsightly view of my barn, and the early morning sounds of my rooster doing what roosters do. She was the kind of person who acted friendly to your face but would report you to the HOA for existing too loudly. And recently, she had installed the kind of backyard that made rich housewives on reality TV jealous. A lush green lawn. A massive koi pond. A ridiculous three-tiered water fountain that gushed water like it was in a Roman palace. During a drought. I had my suspect, but I needed proof. So, the next morning, I got up before dawn and followed the main waterline from my well. I crawled through bushes, over fences, and past the back of my barn, where I noticed something strange. A section of the underground pipe had been tampered with. My jaw clenched as I followed a newly laid PVC pipe stretching toward the property line. The closer I got, the more obvious it became. The pipe led straight to Karen's backyard, hidden under a layer of carefully placed mulch and decorative rock. The audacity. The sheer, mind-numbing gall. She had tapped into my well like it was her personal luxury water supply. I stood there, my hands on my hips, staring at the crime scene like a detective in a murder mystery. But instead of a dead body, there was just my stolen water, flowing freely into Karen's oasis while my farm dried up like an old sponge. I was torn between rage and laughter. Who even does this? Who looks at their neighbor's farm and thinks, you know what? That water should be mine. Oh, Karen was going to regret this. That afternoon, I decided to pay her a visit. I strolled up to her perfectly manicured front yard and rang the doorbell. It took a few seconds, but eventually, she opened the door, dressed in a flowy floral blouse, holding a glass of iced tea like she was the queen of the neighborhood. Her expression was sugary sweet, but her eyes darted around nervously. "Oh, Jake. What a surprise. What brings you here?" she chirped, flashing a too-wide smile. I leaned against her doorframe, pretending to admire the towering water fountain behind her. "Just came to ask if you've noticed anything weird about the water lately." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "The water? Yeah, you know. The stuff that keeps disappearing from my well. Thought you might have some insight since your yard looks like a tropical resort while mine's turning into a dust bowl." She laughed, too high-pitched, and waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't be silly. We've just been extra careful with conservation, that's all." I raised an eyebrow. "That right? Because it looks like your koi fish are getting daily spa treatments while my cows are looking at me like I owe them an apology." She blinked. "Jake, I really don't know what you're talking about." I studied her for a moment, then grinned. "Well, I guess I'll have to get the authorities involved. Maybe they can figure out where all my missing water's going." That wiped the fake cheer off her face real quick. Her eyes darted to the side, and she licked her lips. Now, there's no need for that. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm. I wasn't about to let her off the hook. But I wasn't going to confront her directly yet either. No, that would be too easy. Karen needed to learn a lesson she'd never forget. That night, under the cover of darkness, I shut off her little illegal pipeline. With a few twists and turns of the wrench, I sealed her stolen water supply tight. No more fountains. No more koi pond paradise. No more lush green lawn. I even took a step further, installing a small security camera aimed right at the buried connection spot. If she tried to mess with it again, I'd have hard evidence. The next morning, the screams started. From across the fence, I heard Karen's shriek of horror, followed by frantic shouting. "What is happening?" I sipped my coffee on my porch, watching the show unfold. Karen stomped outside, staring at her dried-up fountain like someone had just stolen her soul. Her sprinklers refused to turn on. Her koi pond had stopped refilling. Her lawn was already starting to brown under the sun's unforgiving heat. I waited. Sure enough, a few minutes later, Karen stormed over, her face red and sweaty, her designer sandals kicking up dust as she marched up my driveway. "Jake," she bellowed. I set my mug down, leaning back in my chair. "Morning, Karen. What's got you so worked up?" She crossed her arms. "Something's wrong with my water. It's just stopped." I pretended to think. Weird coincidence, seeing as I've been having water problems too. Her eyes twitched. "Jake, be serious. My fountain isn't working, my koi fish need water, and my plants are dying. What am I supposed to do?" I took a long, slow sip of my coffee. "Maybe call a plumber." She gaped at me like I'd suggested she sacrifice her firstborn. "A plumber? But that'll cost a fortune." I smiled. "Yeah. Probably." She huffed, muttering under her breath as she stomped away. I watched her go, feeling the first taste of sweet, sweet justice. But this was only the beginning. Karen thought she could steal my water without consequences? Oh, she was about to learn that messing with a farmer's livelihood comes with a price. And it was going to be more expensive than she ever imagined. The morning after cutting off Karen's stolen water supply, I woke up feeling like a king. There was something deeply satisfying about knowing justice had started working its way through the system, even if Karen didn't realize it yet. I had barely finished my first sip of coffee when I heard her outside, losing her mind. It was even better than I had hoped. From my porch, I watched as she stomped around her yard, shaking her fists at her dried-up fountain like it had personally betrayed her. Her once pristine koi pond was now a sad puddle, the expensive fish flopping around as she scrambled to fill it with a garden hose that wasn't working. She fiddled with the knobs, tapping the spout like maybe, just maybe, it would magically start flowing again. But it didn't. Because I had made sure of that. She paced back and forth, clutching her phone, probably calling every plumber in town. It wasn't long before a white van pulled up, and a man in overalls stepped out, looking half asleep. Karen practically dragged him to her backyard, waving her arms wildly as she explained the disaster she was facing. I sat back, enjoying the show. It didn't take long before the plumber started shaking his head, pointing at the ground, and telling her something she definitely didn't want to hear. Her shriek carried across the yard. "What do you mean there's no connection to the city water line? That's impossible." I could see the plumber scratching his head, trying to figure out why this lady was acting like she had lost her life savings instead of just some stolen water. He said something else, and Karen's expression shifted from rage to something that almost looked like panic. She started pointing toward my property, her voice rising in pitch. There it was, the moment she tried to shift the blame. I took another sip of coffee. This was going to be good. A few minutes later, Karen stormed across the yard and right up to my porch. Her face was red, whether from anger or the heat, I wasn't sure. But judging by the way she was gripping her phone like she was about to throw it, I was guessing anger was winning. "Jake, I need to talk to you," she snapped, crossing her arms. "Right now." I leaned back in my chair, setting my coffee down slowly. "Morning, Karen. You look stressed." She took a deep breath like she was trying to keep herself from exploding. Something is wrong with my water. My plumber says I don't have a connection to the main line, which is ridiculous. I need you to tell me if you did something. I blinked. Me? Why would I do something? She let out a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Oh, come on, Jake. We both know my water was working just fine yesterday. Now, all of a sudden, nothing? What are the chances? I shrugged. Well, considering how much water you were using, maybe you just ran out. Her mouth opened and closed, her brain clearly short-circuiting at the idea. This isn't funny. My plants are dying, my fish are suffocating, and do you have any idea how much my property value will drop if my lawn turns brown? I scratched my chin, pretending to think. Sounds rough. She glared at me. Fix it. I let out a long sigh. Karen, I hate to break it to you, but you don't have a legal water connection because you were stealing mine. Her eyes widened, but before she could deny it, I raised a hand. I followed my pipes. You had an illegal tap running straight from my well into your property. That's why your koi fish were practically living better than me while my farm was drying up. Her jaw tightened. That is a ridiculous accusation. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen a few times before holding it up. There, clear as day, was the video footage from my security camera, showing the pipe running from my well straight into her yard. Karen's face drained of color. You can't prove I did that, she stammered. I raised an eyebrow. Doesn't matter who did it. Your property, your responsibility. And since you were the only one benefiting from it, I'd say that makes you guilty. She gritted her teeth, looking like she wanted to scream. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and let out a forced chuckle. Okay. Look, let's not get dramatic. Maybe this was all just a misunderstanding. I'm sure we can work something out. I smirked. Oh, we're definitely working something out. See, I could report this. Illegal water theft? Pretty serious stuff. The fines alone would be in the thousands. Maybe even legal trouble. Her face twitched. But you wouldn't do that, right? We're neighbors. I chuckled. Neighbors don't steal from each other. She let out a nervous laugh, shifting her weight. Okay, so, how much do you want? I tilted my head. Excuse me. How much to make this go away? She asked, voice low. I'll pay you. Just name your price. I pretended to think. Well, let's see. I lost weeks of irrigation. My crops suffered, my animals suffered, and I had to pay a plumber to come out for no reason. And then there's the principle of the thing. So, how about you cover my losses? I'd say, 5,000 should do. Her eyes nearly popped out of her head. 5,000. That's insane. I crossed my arms. You know what else is insane? Stealing water. She let out a frustrated noise, pacing back and forth. That's robbery. I shrugged. If you prefer, I can take this to the HOA and the authorities. But something tells me they'll be a lot less reasonable than me. She stared at me for a long time, her jaw working as if she was chewing on the reality of her situation. Finally, with a defeated sigh, she muttered, Fine. I grinned. Pleasure doing business with you. By the end of the day, Karen had transferred the money to my account, grumbling the whole time. But her problems weren't over yet. Not even close. The HOA got involved the next week when Karen, in a last-ditch effort to save face, tried to claim she was the victim in all of this. Unfortunately for her, my video evidence spoke louder than any excuse she could come up with. They slapped her with a hefty fine for violating neighborhood regulations, adding even more financial pain on top of what she already owed. To make things worse for her, word spread fast in the community. Soon, everyone knew what she had done. The woman who had spent so much time trying to portray herself as the queen of the neighborhood was now the town joke. People whispered when she passed, some even laughing outright when they saw her struggling to keep her once lush yard alive with the few legal watering hours allowed. Karen had wanted to steal my water without consequence. Instead, she had drained her own wallet, ruined her reputation, and turned herself into the laughingstock of the HOA. And the best part? I was just getting started. Karen thought her suffering was over after paying me off and dealing with the HOA fine, but she had no idea that karma was just getting started. Cutting off her water supply was just the beginning. Now she had to live with the consequences of her actions, and I had a front-row seat to her downfall. The first sign of her empire crumbling was the state of her yard. Without my stolen water feeding her ridiculous fountains and oversized lawn, her once pristine property was starting to show the truth. The grass, which had been unnaturally green for months, turned brown in patches, then yellow, then completely dead. Her koi pond, which had been the pride of her backyard, became a glorified mud hole. The expensive fish she had paraded around as a status symbol had to be rehomed, and I heard from a neighbor that she had to pay someone to haul them away. That alone must have been humiliating for her. The fountain was the next to go. I remember stepping out onto my porch one morning, coffee in hand, as Karen and some poor landscaper stood staring at the dry, useless structure. The man kept shaking his head while Karen flailed her arms, clearly arguing that there must be a way to bring it back to life. But without a free, endless water supply to steal from, there wasn't much hope. By the end of the week, the fountain was gone, leaving behind an ugly, empty space in her backyard. Her paradise was falling apart piece by piece. She tried everything to keep up appearances. First, she started hauling in jugs of water from the grocery store, hoping to save what was left of her dying plant. That worked for about a week until she realized just how expensive and exhausting it was. I spotted her one evening, dragging gallon after gallon of water from her car, her face red with frustration as she tried to keep her lawn from turning into a desert. It didn't work. The summer heat was relentless, and without a constant water source, her lush landscaping dried up faster than she could save it. Then came the HOA's final blow. While Karen had managed to worm her way out of legal trouble, the HOA wasn't about to let her off so easily. Since she had been caught illegally tapping into my well, they passed a new regulation preventing any homeowner from installing any kind of underground piping without official approval. That meant if Karen ever tried to get water from anywhere other than the city's limited supply, she would need permits, inspections, and a hefty fee to even attempt it. She had officially been cut off for good. She tried to fight back, of course. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. She called an emergency HOA meeting, trying to rally support from other homeowners, but no one was on her side. Word had spread fast about what she had done, and most of the neighborhood was still laughing about it. Some people even made jokes about setting up a Karen tax for anyone caught breaking water regulations. The meeting ended with her storming out in frustration, realizing she had lost whatever influence she once had. With no other options, she started looking for a way out. The "for sale" sign went up in her yard not long after, but the market wasn't exactly in her favor. Nobody wanted to pay top dollar for a house with a dead lawn, no backyard appeal, and an HOA history filled with violations. The best part? The only people interested in buying were fellow farmers like me. And Karen absolutely despised the idea of her house being owned by someone she considered beneath her. She tried to hold out, refusing low offers and insisting she would wait for the right buyer, but the longer she waited, the worse things got. Her reputation was already trashed, and with each passing week, her house looked worse. The heat had taken its toll, leaving her yard looking more like a dust field than a garden. Even the front of her house was starting to show signs of neglect. Without her endless stolen water supply, everything about her once perfect home fell apart. Then came the final humiliation. One morning, I noticed a moving truck pulling into her driveway. At first, I thought maybe she had finally found a buyer, but as I watched, I realized she wasn't selling. She was leaving. Karen, the woman who had spent months pretending to be the queen of the neighborhood, was packing up and running away. I watched as she and a few movers struggled to load up her overpriced furniture, her designer patio sets, and whatever dignity she had left. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. She didn't knock on doors or try to play the victim one last time. She just disappeared, like a bad memory fading away. And when the moving truck finally pulled out of the driveway, leaving behind an empty, lifeless house, I let out a long, satisfied breath. The war was over. In the days that followed, her house sat empty, a ghost of what it once was. The once green lawn was now just dirt and weed. The backyard, which had been her pride and joy, looked abandoned and forgotten. And as the weeks passed, the offers on her house dropped lower and lower until, finally, someone bought it for a fraction of what she had originally wanted. And who was the lucky buyer? Me. It wasn't even about revenge at that point. It was about principle. Karen had spent so much time trying to ruin my farm, trying to act like she was better than me, and in the end, she had paid me thousands just to leave town. Buying her house was just the final cherry on top. After signing the paperwork, I stood in what was once her pristine backyard, looking around at the dried-up mess she had left behind. It was a fitting end. She had stolen from me, and in the end I had taken back everything, plus more. I turned on the hose, letting the water flow freely onto the ground, knowing that, for once, it was exactly where it was supposed to be. And just like that, the water war was over.